Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney, alongside Nick Zararis. And Nick, another 7 days, another seemingly, moratorium in the NHL as everybody's out by the beach and by their cottages.
The only thing is arbitration dates are starting to get set, but other than that, there's not a whole lot going on. A couple first-round picks signed some ELCs with their teams, but other than that, yeah, there's just
Dean
frankly
Evison to Columbus as well, but
yeah,
other
that's
than that.
that's an interesting hire.
Yep.
I think he's definitely one of the 32 best coaches. I think anytime you can go from because anytime you go from somebody like Vincent, who very
Yeah.
clearly was not ready to be an NHL head coach, to one of the 32 best guys, you did a better job. And there's an
I agree.
argument Evison is probably one of the 20 best as opposed to one of the 32 best, depending on how you feel about his tenure in Minnesota. So in the middle of summer, we're not quite doing what did LeBron have for breakfast this morning, like some of the networks do, or who unfollowed who on Instagram, because there's not a lot going on. As Andrew just said, we're into the conversation, and over the weekend, baseball had their Hall of Fame inductions up in Cooperstown, and it brings a natural question, something I like to think about a lot, something we've debated on the show time and time again. Last year, at one point during the season, we had argued how many all-time greats were currently in the NHL, and we settled on somewhere between 4 and 5, between Crosby, Ovechkin, McDavid, Austin Matthews, and then one of the young defensemen, whichever one you preferred the most, between Makar, Fox, Quinn Hughes, McAvoy, etc. This conversation is a little bit more open-ended. This is something that I enjoy talking about because I feel the criteria for getting into the Hockey Hall of Fame is extremely inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
I feel the people that vote very much vote with their feelings as opposed to what is on a player's resume. Like, I remember genuinely seeing Shea Weber first ballot Hall of Famer, and I like quadruple taked because I was very surprised to see somebody who did not have gaudy counting stats, to see somebody who did not have a Stanley Cup next to his name. Yeah, he's got the Olympic gold medals, and that carries a lot of the weight. And some of the people we're going to talk about today, their international play carries a lot of the weight for their resume. But when guys like him get in, and then Malini can, and guys get hung up waiting for years and years and years.
Alex McGillney not being in the Hall of
Yeah.
Fame is
Yeah.
disgusting. It really is disgusting.
And that'll be something we're going to talk about in relation to a few guys. So without further ado, let's get into this because this is going to take a while. We're very grateful for the Anaheim Ducks, who do not currently have a future Hall of Famer, not even somebody in the consideration. The only way the Ducks can get into said consideration is if one of their young guys blossoms. And based on the amateur profiles of the young guys they've had, it doesn't seem like, even if you wanted to make the argument for like maybe Leo Carlson eventually, he didn't have the Bedard rookie year you need for the gaudy counting stats. And then same kind of boat with Arizona. There's not anybody currently on that team that jumps out as a future Hall of Famer. They're good players. Clayton Keller is one of the 20 best American hockey players in the world. But other than that, there's not really anyone on this team that jumps out as even on that trajectory, let alone an actual contender.
My question, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but I wanted to ask it to you anyway for the Ducks. Let's say the Ducks trade John Gibson and he wins the Cup.
I don't think he has the numbers. Like, if he was close to Jonathan Quick for like wins by an American goalie, I think he would have a stronger case. There is a contingent of guys out there who are still like, why isn't John Van Beesbrook in the Hall of Fame? He's got 300 wins, American goalie, silver medals, whatever. He doesn't have like, if he had an Olympic gold medal or a World Junior gold medal and a Stanley Cup and was close to Quick in the goalie records, or Mike Richter, who I think was second or third before Quick had passed him. That's the type of stuff you need if you don't have the individual accolades. He doesn't have any Vezinas. He doesn't have any Jennings. You need something in conjunction with the Cup, because there are plenty of compilers. We're going to get to Chris Letang, and I know Penguins fans are very adamant that he's definitely, and I'm more of a maybe on him, but we'll get there when we get there. Next up, the Buffalo Sabres. The Sabres are similar boat, where if you like one of their young guys, like if Tage Thompson gets on that Austin Matthews level trajectory of, 40 goals every year, maybe, but he's already kind of old. He's already 27 and he only has one really good counting stat season. Other than him, no one really jumps out.
Dahlin could be.
Dahlin's issue is that he's playing in an era of great defensemen.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard to win Norris's. Like, we're going to talk
Yeah.
about Heiskanen. We're going to talk about McAvoy, two guys who
Yeah.
are very good. They still don't even have top threes to their names for the Norris, let alone actually winning it. Same thing with Dahlin. I think Dahlin's really good. I think Dahlin
I agree.
is one of the 7, 8 best defensemen in the world. It's just without those individual awards, and we know Buffalo isn't winning anything anytime soon, it's really difficult to envision a world where he gets there, even though he's a really good player.
I think Dahlin's one of those players where he has all the tools to make it happen,
Yes.
but the team around him just isn't good enough to propel him to that conversation.
Yes. That I would definitely agree with, because ultimately the Hall of Fame is a narrative award. You know, we were talking about, you need the story, you need the hockey writers to believe in you. You know, looking at the Flames, same kind of deal. Nobody, you know, their best candidate active, they don't really even have one. You know, Huberdeau has the one really good season where he was the third in the Hart Trophy voting. Other than that, you know, Kadri's got a cup. He's got like 2 over a point per game seasons. Rasmus Anderson's too old. Mackenzie Weegar's too old and not putting up the stats.
Yeah.
They don't have anybody that really jumps out either. You would imagine that if it's a Flame, it's somebody who's in the pipeline or somebody who's down the road as opposed to where they're at now. And that's the vast majority of the league, which I think tells you that the league is skewing younger. You know, we know the league is getting younger every single year. And we're setting a high threshold here. There are going to be a lot of people. And when I had done a graphic before last season, a lot of people were like, well, why this guy and why not that guy? And I think we need a higher bar. And this will be the first interesting one we can talk about with Carolina.
I think we skipped Boston.
Yeah, we did skip Boston because we did skip Boston. So Boston, very straightforward. I think Marchand will get in because of the Canada stuff, and he's going to get the counting stats. He's going to get to 1,000 points. He's going to have playing for Team Canada in an Olympics. He might get in 2 Olympics if he's on the team 2 years from now, which he very well might. I think there's a strong argument David Pastrnak is on that trajectory, even though he's not there yet. I think Charlie McAvoy, very similar to Dahlin, is good enough. It's just a matter of if he'll ever have the accolades. And then, you know, if you want to argue Jeremy Swayman, it's very early in that trajectory, but he's going to have a decent shot. You know, if he's a goalie for an Olympic team or 2, he wins a gold medal, he gets a cup, he could get there on accolades as opposed to individual performance, because like defensemen, there are a lot of good goalies in the NHL. It's hard to get into that top 3.
Projecting somebody like Swayman's impossible.
Yeah, he's only 3 years into his NHL
career. He's the kind of guy where if he continues to play at this level for another 10, 12, 14, you know, however long he plays in the NHL for, and also has awards to back it up, if he wins, you know, a Vezina, if he wins a Conn Smythe, maybe that'll obviously push that narrative a long, long way towards him going to the Hall of Fame. But as of right now, he's only played 3 years, so it's really difficult to project him as that. I think Pasternak's in. I think Marchand is definitely in. I think some of the conversation too is the length of time it takes between the retirement and the induction, because there are some players, as soon as their 3-year moratorium period is over between retirement and Hall of Fame induction possibility, they are in immediately.
Yes.
But there are some guys where they get added to the list trademark of guys that will get there eventually, but not right now because there are more pressing names on the list that should, quote unquote, should be there before somebody else. Pasternak's going to be there. Marchand is going to be there. McAvoy, I think, is going to be there at some point, but I think he's going to be added to the list unless he wins a couple of Norrises, maybe even a Conn Smythe as well. Something that'll distinguish him from Fox and Hughes and Makar and all these guys, because Makar, we're going to talk about him in a second, I would have to argue that he's, barring anything ridiculous,
he might already be in right now.
Yeah.
He might genuinely have the best first 5 years in the history of any defenseman in the league. We're going to talk about him in a minute. Next up is Carolina, and I think Brent Burns is a perfect inflection point. I don't think Brent Burns is a Hall of Famer, but he's almost certainly going to get in based on the accolades and his Team Canada stuff. He's got the one Norris, he's got one Olympic gold medal, he's got a World Cup of hockey. He's going to be pretty close to 1,000 points when he retires. I think he's always been very good. I don't know if I ever felt he was the best defenseman in the world or the second or the third best. I know he does have a Norris in there, but I think Burns isn't in the caliber of Erik Karlsson, where I'm more inclined to overlook Erik Karlsson's defensive deficiencies later in his career because at one point he was elite defensively versus with Burns where he was never really that good defensively. He was always really good offensively, a backbone of a really good but not great Sharks team. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I don't think anyone else on Carolina is even particularly close. I think he's the only one who's even close.
I think the one argument that could be made for Brent Burns, and hear me out on this because this is kind of a unique situation. Brent Burns could go in as a builder. And I say that.
I see what you're saying.
I say that because he played both positions. He was a really good forward, and then he became a really good. Not defensively, but still, he was a really good offensive defenseman. He still is a good offensive defenseman. And I say that because maybe in 50, 60, 100 years from now, where there is going to be positionless hockey, just like there's a lot of positionless NBA basketball going on. Down the line, if Brent Burns isn't already in as a player, which he could be because again the narratives and all these things, there could be a case where Brent Burns was one of, if not the best players that have played both positions, and by that virtue, he can see himself in the Hall of Fame, if not as a player.
I could definitely see an argument for that type of vision. I think he's definitely one of the early adopters of that mobile puck mover archetype.
Him and Byfuglien.
Obviously later on, but Karlsson eventually does that. Subban eventually does that. But those guys obviously weren't forwards first. They were just always defensemen.
Yeah.
Next up, the Blackhawks. If Bedard is what he's supposed to be, yes. Other than that, no. I think Taylor Hall will be the third guy to ever win the Hart but not make the Hall of Fame. I think Taylor Hall's always been very good. I never thought Taylor Hall was an elite player. And everybody else on this team, maybe 5 years ago, if you wanted to say Seth Jones could eventually, no. Now, knowing what you know about him now, just no. I mean, there will be people who joke, what about Pat Maroon, 3 straight cups? No. There will be people who say Alec Martinez, all the cups. No.
Yeah.
There's nobody on this team other than Bedard who's going to be in the conversation, at least for right now. Sure, maybe somebody else they draft down the line eventually, but it feels like if Bedard is what he's supposed to be, he will almost assuredly be. And he was really good as a rookie on a god-awful team last year, which is a good indicator, unlike some of the other teams where we've talked about that they have young guys that we like, that we're fans of, whatever, but they don't really – we're basing that on projection as opposed to someone like Bedard who, he was injured. He missed a good month and a half last year, but he showed you the goods when he was out there.
He was really good, and I agree with you. I think if he continues down this trajectory of what we think he's going to be, then he's going to be a great player. He's going to be one of the top forwards in the league, and if he collects some medals, if he collects some awards, then I don't see how why he shouldn't make the Hall of Fame. But again, he's only played less than 82 games in his NHL career so far to this point, so it's impossible for us to sit here, for both of us. I don't want to speak for you, Nick, but he's not in after 60 games in the NHL.
Yes, he's got a Calder, which is nice, but you got to get more.
It's early, but the signs are positive. It's good.
If he gets on the Team Canada next year at the Four Nations, if he gets on the Olympic team, he'll have probably at least one medal from those two competitions. Yeah. He's going to be in the conversation for maybe a Rocket Richard eventually for goal scoring. He's going to have chances if the team actually comes together around him. But early results, early returns good. Colorado is right there with Tampa Bay for the most actives. Yeah. I think McKinnon is a lock right now. Easy. I think McKinnon retires right now. He's in. Yep. I think Mikko Rantanen, if he retires right now, he's got a strong argument to be in.
Agree.
I think Cale Makar, if he retires right now, I think Makar's had the best first 6 years in the league of anybody ever. He's won the Calder, the Stanley Cup, the Conn Smythe, and the years he didn't win the Norris, he was top 3 in the Norris. Mm-hmm. I think there's a real argument Makar's got the best first 5-6 years ever of anybody, including McDavid, including Crosby, because he's got the awards and he's got the cup and he's got the Conn Smythe.
Does Landeskog have an argument?
I don't think so. I don't think the counting stats are there. I'm going to pull up his, I'm going to pull up his profile. I think he won a Calder. I think he won the Calder, but other than that, I don't think he has any awards. He has the Calder, he won the Cup, and he did win an Art Ross, but that was 2011, 2012 with, good Lord, 52 points. That, yeah. Excuse me, not the Art Ross. That's the all rookie team. AR abbreviation on Hockey Reference, not very helpful.
Right.
I don't think Landeskog has the counting stats. He's only at 570 points. He doesn't have any individual awards aside from a Calder. He gets a gold medal, maybe, but he's probably not get. That's the thing. If he gets on Sweden at the next Olympics 2 years from now, maybe. I mean, he's not that old. He'll be 32 at the start of this upcoming season. It's a matter of, can he play again?
The counter argument to that, and I don't know if this is a good metric or not, but there are some players in the Hockey Hall of Fame throughout the years that get in with short careers.
Yeah.
They have the, all around incredible career, and then massive injury hits. They can't play again, but they're in anyway because of the career that they had and what they probably would have done if they hadn't had that, career ending situation. So, and there was a question on YouTube by Chris Bernhardt who asked, how much are All-Stars
not the All-Star game. We're talking about the All-Stars as in the team that gets selected after the playoffs. It's an important distinction because a lot of people don't recognize that.
Yeah, the All-Star game
doesn't matter. It does not matter.
It's very subjective, and there's a lot of players that get off or put on the teams that they're subjective more than they are objective, and I don't really I look at a lot of other things more so than ASG appearances. But with Landeskog, it's a tough question because there is some avenue, because there's been precedent in the past where a player's career was cut short, but the career that they had to that point was really good.
I don't think he hits the threshold, though. Like, his career high in points is 75 in a season. I don't
disagree.
Yeah.
I think we're on the same page, but I think some people could make an argument out of that.
That's fair. Next up, thankfully, the Blue Jackets are going to make this a short conversation. No.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have maybe argued Johnny Gaudreau a few years ago.
Yeah.
But he's never really gotten back to that Hart caliber he was, at the end of the 2010s.
Is Eric Branson and Jack Johnson not good enough for you? Is that?
Jack Johnson is going to be in the Hall of Fame of glue guys and good for the team, but he is not in the Hall of Fame.
I will never forget the day the Rangers signed Jack Johnson. And the insiders just couldn't say anything positive about his on-ice performance, and they literally included.
He's a good guy.
He's a glue guy, loved by his teammates, etc. The etc. is the best part, but I think it was Friedman who said that. But it's one of my favorite all-time moments from these insiders because it really highlights how they will go out of their way to say something positive about somebody before actually telling us how good or bad they are on the ice. Everybody knows Jack Johnson can't play hockey, but people like him, and that's what the tweet was, and that will forever be a Hall of Fame. That's my Hall of Fame moment. Really, is that tweet by I think it was Friedman, but whoever it was.
Jack Johnson's the reason Larry Brooks blocked me. Larry Brooks wrote in his column, I can't imagine why the Rangers would keep Jack Johnson on the team. And I tweeted him, you could ask the team. You have the general manager's phone number. And then he DM'd me, get lost, and blocked me. As opposed to, I will never understand anybody who writes a question in their column. That's your job. Your job as a reporter is to answer questions, not ask them. You need to find the answer to that question. I can't imagine why the Rangers would keep Jack Johnson when they have 7 defensemen they like already. Well, Larry, it would be great if you could find out because I don't know the general manager's phone number, but I digress. Next up, Dallas. Nobody right now. Heiskanen, I think, is in that Dali and McAvoy conversation where he's got the goods. It's just a matter of if he ever gets the cup, if he gets a Conn Smythe, gets a Norris or two. Maybe you want to make an argument for Jason Robertson having the early steps. You want to make the argument for Wyatt Johnston having the early steps, but those guys are so early on. It's really hard to project. And they're not like in the Bedard tier where they immediately came in at 18 where, Robertson, it took him a couple of years to break in. It took Wyatt Johnston a year or two to get going. It took Ottinger a little while. I think all of those young guys are good players. I just don't know, how realistic it is to project that far out with 2 or 3 years of sample. I think Robertson very easily could play himself into that Joe Pavelski tier of one of the great American hockey players of all time,
Sure.
consistent 40 goals, but we're 3 years in. I think he's
Yeah.
very good, but he's only 3 years in.
It's the same thing with Swayman.
Yeah.
Robertson and Swayman are in the same conversation of like, if they continue to play as well as they have been, then I can very well see an argument for it. But it's too early.
Yeah.
Like Robertson has been great for Dallas. Is an exceptional forward, and he has all the tools and the makings of being a potential Hall of Famer. He's been in the league for like 8 minutes. Can we wait a little bit longer before we figure out one way or other what he is? That's where I'm at.
Wholeheartedly agreed with you there. Jamie Benn, Sagan, the peaks weren't long enough. The stats aren't there. Sagan's had a nice career. Jamie Benn's had a really nice career.
He won the Art Ross with like 86 points or whatever.
Yeah, 87 points in 14-15. Yeah.
What a year that was.
I tweeted that graphic a few weeks ago. 5 years ago, 87 points was enough to lead the league. There was one guy with 100 points that season. The year after that, there was three. We've had a real scoring renaissance in the NHL over the last 5 years, and it's largely because the shooting talent has gotten better. Power play opportunities are relatively stable. They're within 30 to 40 year over year, and what was the other thing? And save percentage is down, which tells you that it's just shooting talent that is really changing things. After the Stars, Detroit, Patrick Kane gets in on roller skates. He's got the best resume of any American hockey player ever. Beyond that, I'm not prepared to put anybody. Maybe you want to make an argument. Tarasenko gets the Russian tax where he comes over late. He's got a really good career. I don't think he's got the stats or the awards, but I'm sure there will be a contingent. I don't think Larkin has ever gotten to the peak he probably needed to. And DeBrincat, same deal. DeBrincat's already 27, Larkin's 28. Neither of those guys has really gotten to that elite tier, and they're good, don't get me wrong, but we're talking about the Hall of Fame here.
While there's an argument to be made that Tarasenko could be in the Hall of Fame, I struggle to think that he will off the what we talked about earlier. If McGillney's not in, then how can Tarasenko be in? I understand that Tarasenko has 2 Stanley Cups. I understand that. But have we forgotten all the things that McGillney had to do to make it to the NHL? He had to leave the Soviet Union. Like, he had to leave. The whole situation is insane just for him to get here. And also, when he got here, he completely dominated. And he's not in. So the fact that McGillney's not in makes me think that Tarasenko is not getting in no matter. I mean, I don't want to say no matter what, but if Tarasenko gets in before McGillney, as much as I like Tarasenko, I'm throwing hands. I'm sorry.
Nah, I think Tarasenko doesn't have any of the individual stuff to get it. Now we get to Edmonton, who's got a lot. Corey Perry's a real inflection point for a lot of people. He's got a Hart Trophy. He's got 2 Olympic gold medals. He's got a World Junior gold medal. Every single player who has 3 gold medals is in, but just like statistically, they're in. I think Corey Perry played in an era where the best players, only had 70, 80 points in a season. I think his longevity has kind of hurt his counting stats because he's, a 30-point forward now.
Right.
But I think Corey Perry's resume alone gets him in.
I agree.
Where he's got like I said, he's got 2 Olympic gold medals. He's got a Stanley Cup. He won a Hart Trophy. He's won a Rocket Richard. He's got a really good resume, and the international stuff carries a lot of weight, frankly. It's why Shea Weber's in. He's got the same deal. Sure. Where he's got the 2 gold medals from the Olympics and then 1 from the World Juniors. And then McDavid and Draisaitl, I think, are in right now. I think if both retire right now, they're in.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. McDavid is far and away. He's immediate. Like, yes. the day he retires, he's he skips the list completely. Like, he's already in the day after 3 years. He's gonna get the induction. Draisaitl, the same thing. I know, some people. There's always the argument this time of year where Draisaitl can't carry a line. Draisaitl can't play without McDavid, which is not true. But the argument from some people that'll always be prevalent on the day unless he leaves the Oilers and proves those people that he can, which I kind of don't think will happen at this point, but you never say never. Yeah, those guys are going to make it. I think the question that I have to ask you is, what about Nugent Hopkins?
No. He doesn't have any stats. He doesn't have any individual awards. You got to have at least one thing. If he
Yeah.
had a Selkie, okay, then we get into if they win a cup, then he's got a Selkie, he's got a cup, one team his entire career.
Yeah.
He's got a few good counting stats years in there. I don't think he has enough.
I agree. Evan Bouchard could be.
He's in that same boat as Heiskanen, Dahlin, etc. Of it's a really crowded field to win a Norris. I think he's going to have a good chance because he's going to put up really good numbers. He's going to be a 70, 80-point guy as a defenseman for a long time.
Yeah.
It's just simply a matter of, does he get to the 900 point threshold as a defenseman? If he does that, I think even without a cup, he's going to have a strong chance because that's historically been the measurement. And, he's very early on in his career. He's only 25. He's only really had 2 seasons as a first pair defenseman. And it was only half of last year. And then this year, he really kind of assumed that role. Next up.
It's very early, but again, it's one of those things where you win a Norris, you win a Conn Smythe, you get, you rack up the points and you become a true number one defenseman for 15 years, especially in a market like Edmonton, where, if you can be that great of a player, where, a lot of the quote unquote important people that decide these things are watching you. If you can be that number one player for your entire career, then he's got a good shot.
Next up is Florida. Florida's got a few. Bob with the cup lock.
Yeah.
He's got 2 Vezinas.
Yeah.
He's been top 3 4 times and the cup. He's a lock. Bob going into the final, I thought was pretty close. And you add the cup to the Vezinas 100%. I think that the other guys, it's going to be very interesting to see the second. I don't even want to call it the second, like whatever you want to call this late career Barkov, where if he rattles off, 3 Selkies in 4 years, I think he's almost guaranteed in. I think he's pretty close to being in no matter what.
I think he's going in.
I think he'll go in, especially being, one of the best, if not the best players ever from Finland.
Yeah.
I think he's on a good trajectory. He's 29. And he just needs some individual awards. He got his first Selkie. He has 2 Selkies. He's won a Lady Byng. He's won a cup. He gets another 2 Selkies. I think he's a lock. Hell, I think he might be in already.
I would think that that's true. And his career's not like he's got another.
He's only 29. He's got another 4 or 5 years at top level.
Right, exactly. And the way that he plays, it's one thing to be a really good defensive forward. It's a whole nother beast to be a Patrice Bergeron, where you are a top line center on a top team in the league. And not only are you an excellent defensive forward, you excel at generating offense as well. Barkov is one of, if not the best two-way players in the entire on the planet.
Yeah.
So if you say a player is one of, if not the best insert thing here on the face of the earth, and then follow that up by saying, but he's not a Hall of Famer, that doesn't make any sense to me. So by extension, if you're one of the best on the planet and there's no signs of you stopping that, or someone usurping your title of that, by default, you are a Hall of Famer.
I think Matthew Tkachuk's going to end up in a very similar boat to his dad. In all honesty, he's going to have a Stanley Cup. He's going to be close to 1,000 points. He's at 579 points in 590 games. He's 26 years old. He's going to have a shot. He's going to be close. He'll be on the fence. If he gets an individual award in there or he wins another cup, I think then it comes a lot closer. But counting stats wise, he's going to be right on the fence. Historically, 1,000 points has kind of been the minimum you need to get in. He's on pace to get there. His counting stats have gotten better the longer he's been in his career. And it'll be curious to see if Florida can rattle off any more team success and make the case for anyone else on that group.
I agree. I mean, the same kind of thing you can, like, Aaron Ekblad is
He's a compiler. He's a compiler. He's going to have longevity.
Yeah.
But he's got a Calder. He's got the one cup. I don't think he ever was one of the 5 best defensemen in the world. I don't know if
I agree.
I don't think he's ever been top 3.
And it's tough because of the
injuries.
The injuries have really, I don't want to say derailed his defensive.
He's had a solid career
because he's not a bad player by any means, but without the injuries, he would have been a superstar.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate the way that it all went down. Now, not only is he still an NHL player, my man just won a Stanley Cup. So it's,
And he's a good player.
and
He's not
a
bad.
good, right. He's a good player. So all in all, he still has had a really solid career. But man, without the injuries, he might have been something special.
Truly, truly. Next up, the LA Kings. Kopitar and Doughty, 100%.
Yeah.
Not really a whole lot more to talk about. Multiple Stanley Cups. Kopitar's got a Selke. Doughty has consistently been one of the 10, 15 best defensemen in the world for every year for the last 10 years, other than like 2, where he very clearly realized, oh, the team is bad. I'm not trying, which is what happened
that's what happened. Yeah.
In 2018 and 2019, when the Kings were very bad, he very clearly was like, I'm not wasting my time and energy on this. Yeah. But Doughty's had a really nice career. He might sneak onto the Canadian team next year at the Four Nations thing, win a championship there, and then he gets that on top of the gold medal he got from the World Cup of Hockey. And I believe he was on the Sochi team as well. So that's a really solid NHL career. And of course, multiple Stanley Cups. The one of, if not the best players on teams that won multiple Stanley Cups. That's a really high bar to clear. And he's got the resume, and he's got the stats too to back it up.
No arguments against Kopitar or Doughty. They've both been at the top of their games for the vast majority of their careers. Yeah, Doughty, those couple of years with the Kings were bad. He's like, they don't need me for this. Me putting my body on the line for a team that's not making the playoffs is not something that I want to be a part of. So I'm going to be here in spirit. I'm going to physically be here, but mentally I'm in Cabo, baby. And that's what he did for a couple of years. But then when the Kings got good again, or at least better than they were, he's like, all right, well, time to clock back in. And now he's a really good defenseman again. So zero issue with either of them making it. I mean, they're shoo-ins. Everybody else is either a no or maybe like Quentin Byfield. If he has a great career and he gets trophies, all these things, and he's one of those players that has the tools to make it happen potentially. But it's still for him. It's way too early to figure that out.
Next up is Minnesota. Marc-Andre Fleury is a real inflection point. You and I are Ranger fans. We have always looked at Marc-Andre Fleury with an air of skepticism. I've never felt he's one of the best goalies in the world. I have never felt that I was scared of him. I never went into a playoff series where even when the Penguins were significantly better than the Rangers, whether we're talking pre-John Tortorella or we're talking about 2016 or 2015, I never felt scared of Marc-Andre Fleury in the way I felt about a Vasilevsky, a Bobrovsky, even a Sorokin or a Saros. He's got the resume. He's getting in. He's going to get in. He's going to go in as a Penguin. He's got the 3 cups. He won the Vezina with Vegas, which really impressive that late in his career. He's got a Jennings on that Vegas team as well. He'll get in, and I'm not saying he's bad, but I do think there needs to be a tax for being the 5th best player on a team that won multiple cups.
I don't disagree. I think
he does have the international stuff too. He was
that as well. I think ultimately the way that we feel about a goaltender is one thing. I would have to imagine that Florida fans were like, oh my God, we have to score on Igor Shesterkin. Like, if we're Rangers fans, oh my God, we have to score on Vasilevsky. Oh, we have to score on these guys. I don't think a lot of fans or as many fans were as scared of Fleury as they were of Brodeur and Lundqvist during that era. But at the same time, I don't think that matters when you have the hardware that Fleury does. Yes. When you have multiple rings and Jennings and and all these things
and the gold medals,
that doesn't matter.
It's real. And aside on that, it's really terrible that we've had 2 whole Olympic cycles go by with we don't send anyone. The NHL guys don't go, and that's going to be the deciding factor for some of these guys. Yeah. Where we're talking about people on the fence of making the Hall of Fame or not, where if they had an Olympic gold medal or 2, that very well could have been the deciding factor on them getting in or not.
Absolutely.
And, somebody like a Kaprizov, I don't know if he's ever going to be Hart Trophy good, if he's going to have the counting stats, but if Russia wins a gold medal and he's the best player on that team, there's an argument of, well, really high peak, short peak, best player on an Olympic team. And I just don't know, because he's already, I don't want to say old at 27, but, your best years counting stats wise are usually your late 20s. but he didn't come over until he was 25. It's hard. And we're going to get to Panarin in a minute when we talk about the Rangers, where Panarin's got a real argument as maybe the best undrafted player of all time. He's probably not reaching any of the counting stat thresholds. He's probably not going to win a Hart if he didn't win it this year or for 2019, 2020. And the Rangers got to win a cup. That the need for team accolades to get guys over that threshold, it's really difficult when they don't have international play as a forum to more stuff.
And it's so tough too, because we have no fundamental understanding of how much the people that control who gets in and who doesn't, how much they value and how much stock they put into, these guys came in late, so we're going to either shrink it down or take a look at, okay, well, they played X many years in Russia or wherever they played and how they played there, and then we'll kind of do a blender and just take everything together. Like, we don't know. And hockey is one of the only, there's 4 major sports, but hockey is the only one really where these things tend to matter. Where if you play overseas as a basketball player, and there's very few players that have played overseas in playing basketball that have played long for long durations in the NBA.
Shout out Petrovic.
Yeah, and a little bit of Patrick Beverley as well. He's done that. But
Sabonis, old Sabonis.
Yeah, Arvydas Sabonis, as well. And it is the Naismith Hall of Fame. It's not the NBA Hall of Fame and things like that nature. But hockey is really the only sport of the major 4 that have these kinds of players.
Yes.
Where they come late because they were playing in, overseas, and they were maybe dominating, maybe they were getting to that domination point, and then they came over later on. They're not 21, they're not 22 even. Kaprizov came over at 25. That's late. And yeah, he's a phenomenal player for Minnesota, but will the committee look at that? Or will they just say, okay, well, he was great, but he just wasn't good enough? I don't know.
I agree with you. Next up is one of the interesting ones. Montreal, Carey Price. Carey Price is going to get in because of the narratives. I don't know if Carey Price played long enough. I don't know if Carey Price has the stats to justify making the Hall of Fame.
He's getting in.
He's getting in. He's Canadian. He's got the gold medals. He has the Vezina and the Hart Trophy season at the same time. He was a Vezina finalist 4 times in the top 3, top 4 in Calder, won a Hart as a goalie. That's really one of those. It's like when Kershaw won the MVP and the Cy Young in the same season. That type of thing happens once every 20 to 30 years. Price is one of those weird ones where he was never really on a great team. He doesn't have any team accolades. The best iteration of the Canadiens lost the Stanley Cup in 5 games. They had the easiest path of any team ever to get there, and very clearly did not belong there when they got there. I know there are maybe 1 or 2 people who are somewhere punching air, yelling about Chris Kreider and Alexei Emelin, but Montreal was never that good. They wasted their generational goaltending talent. He's going to get in.
Where have we seen that before, Nick?
Yes. Oh, we're about to get to the Rangers. We're about to get to the Rangers. We've got the Devils and the Islanders ahead of them. I don't think either of those teams have anybody at the moment. Jack Hughes, maybe
Nashville,
eventually.
Can't skip over Nashville.
Nashville's after. And we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah, but Nashville is NA.
Nashville has Yossi, I think, is almost certainly yes.
Yeah.
I think he's got multiple. Right. He's got multiple Norris trophies.
What about Nashville Predators legend Steven Stamkos?
Stamkos is a lock. Stamkos is a lock.
Course,
multiple cups.
Right.
He's got a Richard in there. He's got, I think, 4 50-goal seasons. And that was something I was talking about with somebody the other day. They were like, do you think Zibanejad could do the late career Stamkos thing where he moves to the wing and just puts up crazy counting stats? And I said, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but the Rangers don't have a Nikita Kucherov. Like, as good as Panarin is, he's not good enough to carry somebody to a 110-point season on the wing. Lafreniere had a great season. That was only 70-something points. Zibanejad, even as the trigger man on power play 1, he hasn't sniffed 100 points. His career high, I think, is 83 in a season. So it's hard.
If only he scored at 5-on-5, then maybe he would.
Yes, yes. And then other than that, on Nashville, I think Yossi's a lock. I think Saros probably isn't going to have as long of enough of a peak because very similarly to a lot of the guys we talked about, he didn't become a full-time starter until he was 26.
Yeah.
When you back up a great goalie for as long as you do, it's hard. He's going to have a great peak. Saros is going to have one of the best 5-year stretches of any goalie ever. He doesn't have a Vezina to show for it. He doesn't have a cup to show for it.
What about Ryan
Really
O'Reilly?
Good player. Ryan O'Reilly, I think Ryan O'Reilly is the face of what you can be if you have the perfect environment. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I think he might be able to sneak in. He's got a gold medal from the Olympic team. He won a World Cup of hockey. He's got the Stanley Cup. That Blues team is historical, ended a long drought, was the captain of a team that ended a long drought. But unless he wins another cup, if he wins another cup in Nashville, yes, I think almost definitely. But right now, I think he's Hall of Very Good, and that seems unfair to say about somebody who's been very good for a long time, but doesn't have any Selkies. He doesn't have the counting stats. So you need the accolades. You need the team accolades if you want to be that guy on the fence.
I think he just gets added to the list, TM,
Yes.
and maybe in a year where all of the big names already have gotten in, and it's kind of like
A backlog.
It's like a quote-unquote down year for the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Which, is a very silly thing to say, but you hear what I'm saying. Like, if all the Gretzkys and the Lemieux and, all these guys are already in, and there's no, I forget how many it is every year, but,
you can have up to 5, I believe.
Let's just say 5 for clarity. Like, let's just say that there's no 5, oh my God, how are they not in names? Potentially Ryan O'Reilly is a name that I could see get attention.
That's fair. I think that's reasonable. The Devils, I think the only guy who's reasonably projectable is Dougie Hamilton, and the issue is he can't stay healthy. He's going to be close counting stats wise, especially depending how the rest of that contract goes. Like if the Devils are consistently as good as we think they're going to be going forward into the peak years of Hughes, Hischier, Brett,
and Hughes could get in if he continues to play well.
Jack Hughes,
it's just too early.
It's too early. He's got to stay healthy. That's the knock on Jack Hughes. If he stays healthy, he's going to be right there. He'll be in the Hart conversation. They could win a cup or two. Same thing with Hischier. If Hischier wins 2 Selkies and they win a Stanley Cup, I think that's perfectly within his capabilities. I do think Hischier is one of the 5-6 best defensive forwards in the league. And then everybody else, like you said, it's too early. There's a lot of projection with the guys on the Devils.
Yep.
The Islanders, I don't think anyone's that close. Their best players, Barzal. I don't think he's on that trajectory because he doesn't have the stats. He's already 27. He doesn't have any 100-point seasons. I think Horvat's really good. I don't think he's Hall of Fame. And then everybody else, I don't think so. Sorokin is 29. If Sorokin was 25, 26, and we were assuming this past season was kind of just a fluke, a bad year, whatever, you could say, okay, he wins 2 Vezinas. Maybe they win a cup somewhere down the line. He's already old. He's already 29.
Sorokin is very difficult because he has been one of the best goalies on the planet, and then you get to last year and you wonder what happened. If he comes back next year and has a Vezina performance, then I think a lot of people will forget last season. But if he either repeats it or has maybe a better performance, but just not as good as maybe he was a couple of years ago, then I think a lot of the Hall of Fame conversation will die down. Because at that point, he's going to be 30, at 2 back-to-back years of subpar play comparatively to, his quote-unquote peak. I think this upcoming year is going to be very important for any of his Hall of Fame chances.
He needs awards. He needs awards because he's probably not getting the team success. That's the thing. Because without cups, it becomes very difficult. Speaking of without cups, we now come to the Rangers. Quick, I think, gets in because he's the best American goalie ever.
Sure.
Whether or not how strongly you feel about things like the Jennings and being on good teams, how much you want to ding him for being, the 3rd or 4th best player on teams that won cups, whatever. He does have the Mickey Mouse one with Vegas where he didn't really play a lot, and that gets on his ledger. I think
Panarin so close to winning one in Columbus too.
Yes, Blue Jackets legend,
That's
Jonathan Quick. Panarin, I think he's going to be close on the counting stats. He's 32. He'll be 33 by the end of next season. He's at 781 points in 670 games. He doesn't have any awards. He's got the Calder, but other than that, no individual awards.
A controversial one.
Yes, a controversial one for, he's 23, I think, when he won the award. 24. He was 24 years old when he won the Calder.
The thing about Panarin, and you said it a little bit earlier on, is if you can make the argument, and it goes back to what I was saying as well about Barkov, if you can make the argument that he is the best blank ever, or one of the best, on the planet currently, or what have you, then it's by default that he should be a shoo-in. If he is the best undrafted player ever, maybe in hockey, for sure, you can make the argument that Marty St. Louis is a number 2, maybe. Then, I understand that he doesn't have the Stanley Cups, he doesn't have, the Art Rosses, but when you are one of the most prolific scorers ever, considering you're undrafted, how much you dominated in Russia as well, it's not so, it's a little bit difficult to guess a little bit on how the committee views him, because how we view him and how the committee views him might not be the same thing. And it's difficult because we don't know who the committee is, and that is one of all Hall of Fame committees should be open. We should all know who these people are and what their criteria is for who they're voting, why they're voting these people, what their checklists are. We don't know. These people are shadows. These are lizard people living amongst us, and we have no idea who they are.
We're talking, I'm looking at it now. Ed Belfour, Curtis Joseph, Fence Hall of Fame guys, Bobrovsky, who we think is definitely in. But other than that, there's not really anyone who jumps out insane on the list of guy undrafted. I think Panarin does have a real argument as the best undrafted player ever. Next up, also, Fox Shesterkin to be decided.
Yeah.
Fox is early on, but he's already got a Norris. He's been top 3 twice. He gets a cup. He gets a Conn Smythe, definitely, but he needs more stuff. And with Shesterkin, he gets another Vezina. I think he's almost assured. You get 2, that's typically been more than enough to get you in.
I agree. I mean, but Lundqvist had a gold medal.
Yes, he had an Olympic gold medal.
You mentioned it's very difficult to have that conversation because we have it's essentially an entire generation of elite NHL talent that will never have that on their resume.
Yep.
All the World Cup of Hockeys and the 4 Nations, that's good, but that's not the same thing as an Olympic gold medal. It's just not, or a silver. The NHL having their own thing is fine and dandy, but it's not the same until you do it in the Olympics. And that's it's just a shame. It's a shame that the NHL hasn't sent anybody since 2014. It's been 10 years, guys. Hopefully this gets sorted out come 2026. But, we still don't know. Guys, it's 2 years away. We get a move on, please, I beg of you. But, and it's tough because we can't look at Shesterkin or Sorokin and guys like that and be like, okay, well, they have, really good stats and things like that, but they also have an international award. We can't say that.
Next up, Ottawa. Giroux's going to be on the fence. I think Giroux probably gets in based on narratives, but I've never felt that he was a shoo-in. I think he'll go onto the list like many of the other people we've talked about today. And that's really it. Other than that, all their guys are projections or hopefuls.
Yeah.
I like the guys they have. I like Stützle. I like Brady Tkachuk. We need more. It's early.
Yep, I agree.
After that, we get to the Flyers, who I don't think they have anybody even in the conversation.
No.
Their closest bet is Michkov, who's yet to play an NHL game. So
yeah, I agree. There's nobody off the page currently that is
even in the worth having a conversation about.
Not particularly.
All right, Pittsburgh, Crosby, Malkin, Carlson, locks. All of them mortal locks.
Yeah.
Carlson almost surely gets in, and
Yeah,
not
he's gonna
Carlson,
get
excuse me,
it.
Letang, excuse me,
Yeah,
that's who I meant.
Letang. Yeah, Letang.
Letang,
Yeah.
he's got 2 cups. He has a Masterton. He has 1 Olympic medal. He was on the World Cup of Hockey team. He'll get in. He's not going to really hit the threshold for point. He might get there. It's been about 800 for defenseman points wise. That gets you in. He's at 740 right now. He's got 2 years left on his deal. He'll probably ride that out. He almost certainly gets in. I've never really felt that he was that tier of player. I don't think he's got one top 3 finish in Norris voting. I've never felt he was that elite tier, but he'll get in.
It doesn't matter what we think, Nick. He's getting in.
The Sharks, we'll lump Thornton in here. We can lump Pavelski in here because we didn't talk about them. Marlowe. I've never really felt that Marlowe was on their tier. I think Pavelski will get the American bump.
Yeah.
That'll help him.
I agree.
And then Thornton, I think 100%.
Oh, yeah. That's if he doesn't get in, then there's gonna be fist fights going on in the parking lot of the Hall of Fame. Yeah, he's getting in. No pushback from me there. But in terms of like their roster right now, no.
We're talking about guys who have yet to play NHL games or have less than 10 games, like the Flyers. Michkov, maybe. Celebrini or Will Smith, maybe.
My one fear, I mean, fear is it's a stretch, but my concern is Vlasic gets it because he does
have 2 gold medals.
He has the gold medals, but the problem is that he fell off
fast.
He fell off really fast. But the second
and really early.
The second concern I have is he fell off a lot faster than the people that were airing his tires thought he did. Yes. Like he fell off, and people for years were so like, "Oh yeah, Vlasic is one of the best defensemen in the league," which helps his narrative. But my man's fell off a cliff.
Yeah,
early. So I don't think he gets. I don't think he should get in. But that won't stop the narratives from happening.
Agreed with you. Next up is Seattle. They don't have anybody who's even close. So I'll ask you, do you think Mark Giordano is in, or do you think he is close? He's got a Norris.
Yeah.
No, nothing else though. He's not even at 800 points.
I think he's a very good guy.
I do too. He doesn't. They don't have anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, he gets added to the list.
Yes.
And maybe down the line, 30, 40 years from now, when narratives change, maybe he gets in. But again, there's a tier list when we get to Hall of Fame conversations. Gretzky, Lemieux, Bobby Orr, these guys, as soon as they retire, they're the very 12:01 a.m. 3 years after they retire, they're getting in no problem, no questions asked. And it's tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. Giordano is gonna get to one of those lower tiers potentially down the line, and maybe 50 years from now or 40 years from now he'll get it.
I think that's reasonable. Next up is St. Louis. The only player I think who's worth having a conversation about is Ryan Suter, who has yet to play a game for the Blues, but I think he will get in based on the American tax, where if you're a good American player, you get the benefit of the doubt in the way that you just don't if you're from another country. No medal, a couple silvers. Other than that, no individual awards, no cups. Good player. Very good player for a long time, but the fall off, he joins the elusive Tony DeAngelo list, the only player to be bought out 2 separate times. Good. No one else close. No Torrey Krug, no Binnington, no Parayko. If you want to say one of the young guys down the road, maybe, but we're very early on.
I like Kyrou a lot.
I like Kyrou. I like Robert Thomas, but it's very
Thomas,
early
I like
on
a
both
lot.
of those guys.
I mean, I'll wave the pom poms if Hal Buchevich till the cows come home. Everybody knows that. Is he a Hall of Fame player? I mean, it maybe again, if he wins the Stanley Cup, because he's one of the best two-way forwards in the league. If he elevates to a whole new level and wins a Selke, if he wins a Conn Smythe, if he gets 120 points in a season, then we can have that conversation. But he's a fantastic player. But is he a Hall of Fame player? Not right now.
Agreed. Next up, after St. Louis, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Hedman, Vasilevsky, Kucherov, locks. No, there's no conversation. All 3 of those guys are in right now if they retire.
What about Ryan McDonough?
Ryan McDonough's Hall of very good. He doesn't have any individual awards. He was never the number 1 defenseman on a Stanley Cup winning team. very good player. I think
Yep.
Braden Point's going to run into a similar boat where good player, not the best player on a team, no individual awards. He'll be all right on counting stats. I think he's at five something right now. He's not even, he's at 550
Yeah.
points in 580 games. He's 28 years old. He'd have to play close to 80, 90 points a season for another 7, 8 years if he wanted to sniff 1,000. I think Braden Point was at one point one of the best players in the world, but I don't know if he can maintain that long enough to get to the counting stats.
Especially now that the Lightning offensively are
A one-line team.
They're not like the world beaters that they once were. Now, but again, with Jake Gensel, maybe, but they're not. I wouldn't put them as like this is the best team in the NHL category for sure.
No. I think that would be the other caveat to add on to that. He's already missed his boat. If he was going to win a Conn Smythe, it would have been on one of the teams that won the cup already. And that's not a knock on his performance. He was really good in both of their playoff runs to win the Stanley Cup. And he was pretty solid in the third one when they ended up losing to the Avalanche anyway. Next up is Toronto. John Tavares is close. I think he will get in. Matthews will get in. Marner will get in. And Nylander, it depends.
Will Marner get in?
Marner's going to get in. Marner's got a World Juniors. Marner's going to end up be over 1,000 points for his career. No, he's going to get some Selke. He'll have some top threes in Selke voting. Probably not going to have any Harts or Art Rosses or Rocket Richards, but he's going to be over 1,000 points for his career, over a point per game. He's going to probably get on one of the teams, whether he'll be on the Olympic team, he'll be on the Four Nations team. That'll be 2 gold medals. He'll get in.
Well, my follow-up question to you is, of all the people that we've listed to this point of, for sure making the Hall of Fame, is Mitch Marner the most controversial one?
For non-off the ice things, yes.
Yeah, well,
yes.
Yeah, strictly on ice stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Well, not even because I think we talk about this, the average hockey fan looks at the box score. And we don't expect the average hockey fan to do homework. Hockey's supposed to be fun. It's incumbent upon the informative sources out there, people like us, people in the media, to illustrate these pictures, to detail what makes a player effective versus ineffective. And Marner's been one of the 10 best players in the world for at least the last 4, if not 5 seasons. And he's going to have the stats and he'll have the international play. And maybe he leaves the Leafs. Maybe he goes somewhere else after this upcoming season and he has more team success there. And he gets a little bit less of the fire on him for being in a smaller market. It would benefit him a lot if he was able to get out of Toronto purely for his peace of mind. And then, he might be able to get some team success too. Anytime a team loses in the playoffs, it's not just one guy's fault. And unfortunately, when you're a team like Toronto that has a lot of money tied up in a handful of players, it's easy to point your fingers at those 2 guys. And then Nylander, I don't think he's going to get there stats-wise because it took him a little while to become this tier of player. If he stays where he's at right now for half a decade and they win a cup or he gets an individual award, sure. But he didn't really get going as top 20, 30 player in the world until really this past season.
Here's the thing. If there's some people out there that argue that Mitch Marner isn't the Hall of Famer, then there's no way that Nylander is.
Correct.
Right now.
Correct, yeah. Nylander is 28 years old, 528 points in 600 games. He's good. He's really only has one elite season this past year where he had 98 points. He's never been top 3 in any of the awards, never been top 10 in any of the awards. So that's a tough one. Next up, Vancouver. It's early, but Quinn Hughes is in that McAvoy, Heiskanen, Dahlin tier of guys of he'll get the awards. He's got a Norris already, which puts him ahead of some of those guys I just mentioned. The team success will help or hurt him, but I think he'll consistently be in the Norris voting for the next decade, and that'll get him in the conversation.
I think Quinn Hughes, if he continues to play like this, has all the makings of a Hall of Famer. I mean, all that he has to do now at this point is just keep
accumulate.
Is to keep playing the way that he has and accumulate. Like that's really the only thing stopping from being Hall of Famer. I mean, the only other
Pedersen's early.
Pedersen's early, Brock Besser,
He didn't not high enough of a peak. His
yeah,
best season is 44 goals.
yeah,
You got if you want to be the goal scoring guy, you need 4 or 5 50-goal
I agree.
seasons, and he's already 28 years old.
Yeah.
So it's hard to envision him getting there. JT Miller peak started too late. He's going to have a solid NHL career. Unless it's a Conn Smythe, that's really the only individual award I could see a JT Miller winning.
Demko could.
He's I think he's going to end up in the box with like Sorokin, where he's going to have a really good peak for a few years. If he doesn't have a Vezina or two to show for it, it's really hard for a guy like him. I could see him having a resume very similar to Binnington, where, they win a cup, but that's really all he's got in his column. And you can be a very good player on a cup team, but unless you have some individual stuff to accompany that, it's really hard to kind of see me get hits for me to see him getting to that threshold.
I agree. If Demko really elevates his game and becomes, I like Demko a lot.
Me too.
But if he takes another step and really solidifies himself as a top 3 goaltender in the sport and holds on to that for, multiple years, like he has all the makings of a player that can achieve that. But if he does, and he gets trophies along the way, and he, gets some really nice stat lines and all these things that, that are shiny, then he could. As of right now, I think it's a little bit too early to say yes to that. But, if he continues to improve and get better, then there's a case.
Next up, this is an interesting one. Vegas. I think the only lock is Pietrangelo for 2 cups, being the best defenseman on 2 cup teams. He's got a gold medal. He's got a World Cup of Hockey gold medal. He probably gets on to the 4 Nations team next year, and they probably win that. Eichel, I think, is on a reasonable path, but he is going to need to stay healthy. I think Mark Stone is probably too injured, even though Mark Stone has had a really good NHL career. I don't think he has any of the stuff. He doesn't have a Selke. He's never going to be over 100 points in a season type guy. He's 32 years old, and he's got 560 points in 640 games. He just hasn't stayed healthy enough, and he didn't get on to a good team until he was already kind of old.
It's really difficult with Mark Stone. I think he is a forward that at his peak, again, is one of the best 2-way forwards in the sport. And to be the best 2-way forwards in hockey is so immeasurably difficult, because it's if you're a sniper, right, and that's your forte, then it's okay in most regards if you kind of skimp out a little bit on defense because you want to score that goal, you want to create that offense, and defense isn't something that you are supposed to do a lot of the time. That's not your primary objective. Whereas with guys like Mark Stone, defense doesn't show up on the stat sheet.
Yeah. You got to search that out.
But he is consistently really good in that end of the ice. So again, we don't know the criteria of these lizard people that are in the Hall of Fame because we don't know who they are. Again, what their checklists are, how much homework they're doing when it comes to players like Mark Stone. I think Mark Stone probably should be a Hall of Famer because of how good he has been when he's on the ice. He makes that team so much better.
Yes.
He makes the Vegas Golden Knights so much better.
He got Chandler Stevenson $50 million.
Yeah. When you get other players paid, that's when you know that you're a real difference maker. And I would have to argue that Mark Stone is a Hall of Famer. Whether he'll get in, it's impossible to determine that. But I think same thing with Jack Eichel, man. Like he makes Vegas so much better. He was outstanding in Buffalo, and I understand Buffalo fans may not like him or whatever, but he is an exceptional player, and injuries aside, was really one of the leading talents behind that Vegas win, and I kind of think he gets in as well.
Yeah. Washington's next. Ovechkin for sure, obviously. Backstrom, I think, probably gets in, even though he's probably more on the fence.
Nicholas Backstrom was the best passing center on the planet.
Yeah. One of the highest peaks. He was on the gold medal Sweden team in 2006. Really good for a long time. Was never, Selke, never Hart, but really good for a long time. And 3 years ago, prior to the serious injury stuff, I would have said 100% because he was well on pace with all of the counting stats. And we've talked about a few guys in this conversation of because of injuries, they had their peak shortened. They never got to the threshold. I think he will be one of those guys where they will say, if he had stayed healthy, he hits all the benchmarks. He's got the cup. They probably try and get him and Ovechkin to go in together, that type of
Maybe.
thing. I think him for sure. And then
Yeah.
I think John Carlson is on the fence because he will get the American bump that a lot of these guys we've talked about do. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, but I do think he will go on that list. And like a lot of people we've said, if there's a bad year, they'll pluck him off the list.
It's one of those situations where John Carlson's a phenomenal player, and I would have loved to have him on the Rangers, right? Like he's a great player that really held down the blue line for the Capitals for his entire career. But you have to ask yourself this question. If when other players or other teams were playing the Capitals, were they saying, "Oh my God, we're gonna be playing John Carlson. Everybody, hold on to your seats."
No.
And that is really a predominant question that you have to ask yourself. When other teams are playing Vegas, right, the question is, oh my God, we have to handle Eichel. We have to handle Mark Stone. We have to handle Petrangelo. We have to handle all these guys. Like, how are we going to do it all? Do teams say the same thing about John Carlson? And like that's the question that has to be answered truthfully and objectively. Now I understand, obviously Caps fans want him in, but if you're a third party fan, like let's say you're a fan of the Coyotes, for example, and the Caps and the Coyotes, well, went back when they were playing, were going to play the Capitals during Carlson's peak. Were you saying to yourself, Carlson's the best player on the ice right now? Is John Carlson somebody that you have to avoid at all costs? I don't know if the answer to that is yes. And if you are unsure if the answer is yes, then by extension, he gets onto the list of maybe, but he's not a surefire name.
Really good player for a long time, but he's going to be on the fence. He might get in if there's a down year, but I would lean no. And then last up is Winnipeg. Hellebuck 100%.
Yeah.
He's got multiple Vezinas.
Easy.
He might be able to sneak a gold or a silver medal in an international competition in here on the back end. Very easily could be in the mix for another Vezina before it's all said and done.
Easily.
I think Scheifele probably gets in, and this is going to sound weird, but like for being the face of the new Jets, if that makes sense, for being the face of the team that went back to Winnipeg after they folded the Thrashers, and really good, was good on some really good Jets teams. I still say that 2018 Jets team is the best team to not win the Stanley Cup of the 2010s. He's going to get to 1,000 career points more likely than not. He's 31. He's at 717. He's got 6 years left on that atrocity of a contract he signed. He'll get there. He'll get to 1,000 points. He's probably never winning any awards, but he's going to probably get in.
Yeah, I think the argument can be made that because Scheifele not only has been the best player on Winnipeg for a decade plus, he's also been, like you said, the face of the franchise. It is really difficult to, one, be the face of the franchise, and two, hold on to that title, but also the level of play that he has had for as long as he had. And people will counter argue and say, "Oh, well, defensively, my man's is an atrocity.
Yes,
he is awful defensively." And to a large extent, I agree. But I think when you move a franchise somewhere, and I understand Winnipeg has a large fan base that is a diehard, passionate fan base. Winnipeg is out in the middle of nowhere. When you move a team out to the middle of nowhere, like objectively, like geographically, Winnipeg is out in the middle of nowhere with players don't want to go when they visit because there's not a whole lot to do. Like, to be the face of a franchise in that kind of environment and love it and really push the sport and the team in that location, as well as Scheifele has done to this point, I think that kind of usurps the fact that, your grandma could skate past them.
Yes, I think those guys. And then you feel like there probably would have been a little more buzz about Bufflin if he had kept playing. I think
Yeah.
Bufflin would have been on the fence. He doesn't have any awards. He doesn't have any international stuff, but
He could be a
notable.
builder just like Brent Burns.
Yeah, exactly. But that'll do it. That was all 32 teams. That was an ungodly amount of players. That was an ungodly amount of qualifiers and ifs and buts and maybes. But it is the dead of summer, and we are going to do our best to continue giving you guys interesting, non-filler content.
That's right.
That will do it for today's show. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Leave the show a 5-star review if you are listening on Apple or Spotify. If you're watching over on YouTube, subscribe. Hit the alarm bell to get a notification whenever new content goes live. Leave us a comment. Who is your stone cold lock that isn't like Sidney Crosby? Give us somebody on that tier below. Somebody we said who's on the list that you feel passionately about should be a Hall of Famer. One person popped into the comments midway through our conversation and said Dahlin is on that trajectory. We think he can be.
Sure.
We genuinely do think he can be.
Skills.
He has the skills. It's just a matter of everything coming together, which is really kind of the theme in today's NHL. There are a whole lot of talented guys. It's just a matter of things coming together. That'll do it for this week's show. Andrew and I will talk to you guys next Monday.
Later.